The fire had been dead for hours. The cave mouth was a jagged silhouette against a sky so black it seemed to breathe. You could feel the cold rising from the stone floor through the animal skins beneath you. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and something metallic. Your hands were numb, your ears strained for the crack of a branch, the scrape of a claw, the soft breath of something that had learned to hunt in the absolute absence of light. You have never been that person. You have never lived in that cave, known that cold, felt that specific terror of being prey while the world went dark. But your body knows. Your pulse quickens in a dim room. Your breath catches when the power fails. You lie in bed and the silence opens like a wound, and your mind paints shapes in the shadows that have no name. Have you ever wondered why that is? The old answer was simple. Evolution gave us a leftover, a primitive relic. A useless fear that once helped our ancestors survive saber-toothed cats and now only makes us check under the bed. The official story says it is an evolutionary misstep, a neural circuit that fires when it should be silent, a vestigial organ of the mind that has outlived its purpose. The therapists call it a phobia. The neuroscientists call it heightened amygdala reactivity. The textbooks call it an adaptive response to nocturnal predation pressure that has lost its adaptive value. But here's the strange part. That explanation has a crack in it, a fissure that runs deeper than most people are willing to look. If this is the moment where the official story begins to split open for you, then you already sense what lies beneath. Subscribe so you do not miss where this fissure leads, because the crack only grows wider from here. And in the comments, write the word fissure if you have ever felt that something was wrong with a simple explanation, even before you could name why. Consider this. The fear of the dark is not merely human. It appears in every culture that has ever been studied. Isolated hunter-gatherer groups in the Amazon, nomadic pastoralists in the Mongolian steppe, inhabitants of Pacific islands so remote they were never contacted by the outside world until the 20th century. All of them have stories about what stalks the night. All of them teach their children to fear the absence of light. The psychiatrist Ronald Rackamon documented this pattern across more than 30 separate cultures in the 1970s. His conclusion was quiet, but devastating. The fear of the dark is not learned. It does not require a traumatic experience. It appears spontaneously in children between the ages of 2 and 4, regardless of environment, regardless of upbringing, regardless of whether they have ever been told a single story about monsters. Think about that. A child born in a Tokyo apartment, raised on cartoons and fluorescent lighting, will still wake screaming from a nightmare they cannot describe. A child born in a Berber tent in the Sahara, who has never seen a horror film, will ask for a lamp to be left burning. The content of the fear changes. The architecture does not. The old answer was too neat. It said the fear was a predator detection mechanism, written into our neural circuitry during the Pleistocene, triggered by darkness because darkness concealed the large carnivores that killed 15% of our ancestors. The University of Zurich's 2001 fMRI study confirmed that the human amygdala responds to threatening images faster when contrast is low. The brain detects a snake shape in a dim image 30 milliseconds faster than in a bright one. It makes sense. Predators hunt at night. The brain evolved to assume danger in darkness. But that raises a darker question. If the fear is merely about predators, why does the brain not stop when the predators disappear? Why does the child in the Tokyo apartment surrounded by concrete walls and electric lights still feel the same terror as the child in the Sahara? Why does the adult who knows there are no wolves within 1,000 kilometers still feel their skin prickle when they walk into a completely black room? Here is what nobody noticed. The predator detection hypothesis explains why the fear exists. It does not explain why the fear persists after the predators are gone. It does not explain why the fear attaches itself to shapes that have nothing to do with animals. It does not explain why the human brain, alone among primate brains, has developed a kind of nocturnal pattern recognition that goes far beyond simple threat detection. The real machinery is stranger than evolution alone can explain. This is the point where the path splits. You can stay with the surface explanation, or you can follow the machinery deeper into the cave. Subscribe to stay with the descent. And in the comments, tell me what shape your fear takes when the predators are gone. The one that has nothing to do with wolves or snakes. The psychologist David Hufford spent decades documenting a phenomenon called sleep paralysis. In his 1982 book, The Terror That Comes in the Night, he recorded over 200 accounts from people who had experienced the sensation of being awake, but unable to move while a presence pressed down on their chest. The descriptions were eerily consistent across cultures: a weight, a shadow, a shape that seemed to watch from the corner of the room, a feeling of evil so absolute it left people trembling for days. Hufford did something unusual. He did not assume these people were lying or mentally ill. He compared their accounts to cross-cultural reports from Newfoundland, China, Nigeria, and Polynesia. The same pattern emerged everywhere. A figure, a crushing weight, a malevolent intelligence that drained the air from the room. The scientific establishment called it a REM intrusion, a malfunction of the atonia mechanism that normally paralyzes the body during dreaming. But that explanation never answered the question Hufford was asking. Why does the brain, in this specific state, always paint the same threat? Why does the intruder always have the same shape? Why does the fear feel so specific, so intentional, as if the darkness itself had chosen to visit you? The old answer was simple. You are awake. Your body is paralyzed. Your brain, detecting the incongruity, generates a narrative to explain the paralysis. The narrative draws on cultural templates. Demons in the Middle Ages. Shadow figures in the modern era. The story changes. The underlying pattern does not. But that explanation, too, has a crack in it. The crack is this. Sleep paralysis narratives predate the cultural templates that supposedly create them. The earliest recorded description of sleep paralysis appears in a 10th century Persian medical text. It describes exactly the same experience as a 21st century New Yorker. A weight, a presence, a terror that has no earthly source. The culture did not invent the experience. The experience invented the culture. Here is the pivot. The brain does not just detect threats in the dark. It generates them. It produces fear as a product of its own architecture, not as a response to external danger. The predator detection hypothesis was true, but incomplete. The real mechanism is darker. The brain uses darkness as a canvas onto which it projects the unresolved contents of its own mind. Consider the evidence from pareidolia research. In 2009, the neuroscientist Maria Hajikani published a study showing that the human brain detects faces in random noise within 40 milliseconds. That is faster than any other object category, faster than tools, faster than animals, faster than text. The brain is not merely sensitive to faces. It is hypersensitive. It sees faces where no faces exist. In clouds, in tree bark, in the grain of a wooden door, in the shadows cast by a coat hanging on a hook. The evolutionary logic is clear. A false positive costs nothing. A missed predator costs everything. Better to see a face that is not there than to miss a face that is. But here's the strange part. The faces the brain paints in the dark are not neutral. They are threatening. They are watching. They are malevolent. The brain does not just detect patterns. It detects hostile patterns. It reads intention into noise. It treats the darkness as an enemy that is looking back. Now apply this to the fear of the dark. The child who wakes screaming from a nightmare is not remembering a predator. They are experiencing the brain's generative machinery running in the absence of sensory input. The darkness deprives the visual cortex of information. The brain, desperate for pattern, begins to produce its own. These internally generated images are not random. They are shaped by the same neural architecture that evolved to detect threats. The result is a waking nightmare, a hallucination of presence. A face in the void that feels more real than anything you have ever seen, with your eyes open. The old answer said the fear of the dark was about predators. It was wrong. The fear of the dark is about something far more intimate. The brain is not afraid of what might be outside. It is afraid of what it will produce inside. Have you ever wondered why the most terrifying scenes in horror films always take place in dim light? The shower scene in Psycho. The opening of The Silence of the Lambs. The final crawl space in The Descent. The cinematographers know what the scientists have only recently confirmed. The human brain processes threat differently in low light. The amygdala activates more strongly when visual contrast is reduced. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational evaluation, is slower to modulate the response. You feel fear before you can think yourself out of it. The director has stolen your cognitive buffer. You are not watching a film. You are experiencing your own neural architecture in its raw, unfiltered state. But the real revelation is this. The fear of the dark is not about monsters. It is not about predators. It is not even about death. The fear of the dark is about self-recognition. The brain paints threats onto the darkness because the alternative is worse. The alternative is to confront the void directly, to sit in the absolute absence of pattern, to let the mind dissolve into the silence that has no shape and no sound and no promise of an ending. The ancient ancestors who controlled fire were not just keeping predators at bay. They were keeping themselves from falling into the abyss of their own sensory deprivation. The fire was not a weapon. It was a shield against the darkness inside. This is the part most people miss. The fear of the dark is not a flaw. It is not a vestige. It is not an evolutionary mistake. It is a high-resolution diagnostic scan of the human mind in its most vulnerable state. The darkness is not the enemy. The darkness is the background against which your own mind becomes visible to itself. The modern world has done something no previous civilization has attempted. It has eliminated the experience of complete darkness, streetlights, nightlights, smartphones, televisions that glow in the corner of the bedroom. The average person in a developed country spends less than 15 minutes a year in conditions of absolute darkness. We have extinguished the cave. We have paved over the ancestral landscape of the night, and we have lost something as a result. The fear of the dark was not merely a survival mechanism. It was a ritual, a threshold, a practice of attention that forced the mind to confront its own contents. The ancestral human who sat in the dark, alone, without fire, was not only terrified. They were learning. They were watching their own mind generate images. They were mapping the terrain of their own unconscious. They were developing a relationship with the part of themselves that only emerges when the external world withdraws. We have lost that. We have replaced it with YouTube videos at 3 a.m, with the blue light of a screen that tells us we are not alone. But we are alone. We are always alone in the dark. The only difference is whether we are willing to sit with it. The next time you feel your pulse quicken in a dim room, do not reach for the light switch immediately. Pause. Notice what your mind is doing. Notice the face it is painting in the shadows. Notice the creature that is forming at the edge of your vision. That creature is not a ghost. It is not a predator. It is not a demon. It is you. It is the shape your fear takes when it has no external target. It is the mirror your brain holds up to its own depth. The old answer said the fear of the dark was about survival. The real answer is stranger. The fear of the dark is about self-knowledge. And the creature in the corner of the room is not coming for you. It has always already been you. The question is whether you are brave enough to turn around and look it in the eyes. Because once you do, you will realize something far more unsettling. The creature is looking back, and it has been waiting for you to acknowledge its existence for your entire life. We will return to this. There is more to the architecture of the dark than the fear itself. There is the question of what happens when you stop running. There is the question of what you find when you sit with the creature long enough for it to speak. Subscribe now so you are here when the silence breaks open again. And before you go, write in the comments the first word that came to mind when you imagined turning around to face that creature, because that word is the shape of your own dark architecture. But that is a journey for another night. For now, sit with what you know. Sit with what your body has known all along. The dark is not the enemy. The dark is where you meet yourself. And that meeting is the oldest human ritual of all.